All right, everybody got quiet. Thank you all for being here. It is an honor and a privilege to recognize that it is a new day in Oklahoma and for the nation in our battle against addiction and the opioid epidemic. We have just this morning had we, the state of Oklahoma, had a settlement and a consent decree approved by the district judge down in Cleveland County with regard to our cause of action against one of the defendants in the opioid litigation, Purdue Pharma. Through this historic agreement, in which the state will enjoy a $270 million settlement, a nearly $200 million endowment for the OSU Center for Health Sciences Center for Wellness and Recovery will occur. This begins a new chapter for those struggling with addiction. I will outline the details of that settlement here in just a moment. First, President Hargis and Dr. Schramm, thank you all for both being here today and for your commitment to taking our fight to the next level. Utilizing the successful model that you have fostered here at the Center for Wellness and Recovery and expanding it through this endowment will truly create a national center for addiction treatment and research. It is going to save countless lives, and it's going to keep families together. And it's going to be the tip of the spear in terms of leading the nation out of the addiction epidemic that has claimed just this past year 70,000 lives. The fact remains, the addiction crisis facing our state and nation is a clear and present danger, but we are doing something about it today. Another data point, an average of 150 people in this country die every day from an opioid overdose. In 2018, life expectancy for Americans dropped again, in large part because of the continuing rising numbers of drug overdoses. According to the data from the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, since 2004, more than 10,000 Oklahomans have died from an overdose. And in 2018, nearly 50% of all overdose deaths in the state were attributed to pharmaceutical drugs. Out of the more than 3,000 Oklahomans admitted to the hospital in our state for a non-fatal overdose this past year, 80% involved a prescription opioid. Quite simply, we are out of time with regard to the responsibility we have to deal with this crisis. But the money from this settlement will provide significant and substantial funding to the Center for Wellness and Recovery here, allowing us to focus our attention on what should be our highest priority, Americans struggling with addiction. I want to say that the OSU Center for Wellness and Recovery in these negotiations was selected because its footprint in this space is well established. It is the gold standard and is already a national leader in studying and treating addiction and finding innovative ways to cure it. And this money will allow the center to expand its mission to a national level to combat the crisis. And I know I speak for most everybody in this room in saying that I have full faith and confidence in Dr. Shrum and her talented team to lead this initiative. So I'll let Dr. Shrum talk more about the center in a little bit, but I want to say that the OSU Center for Wellness and Recovery is the nation's leading comprehensive treatment and research center for treating pain and addiction. It promotes collaborative and interdisciplinary approaches to the study of treatment and the public's understanding of pain, substance use, and abuse. Here at OSU, they treat addiction as a brain disease. When I was here for the launch of the Center for Wellness and Recovery back in 2017, something Dr. Shrum said has stuck with me ever since. It was her vision to start this program, and she started it with no new funds, with existing funds here at the OSU Center for Health Sciences, because she was dedicated to finding a better path forward for Oklahomans who are in need of addiction treatment. She did it because she knew it was important, it was essential to better understand addiction psychology, the role of the brain in perceiving and managing pain, and finding alternative modalities for treating those suffering with chronic pain. I continue to applaud you and the efforts of your team, Dr. Shrum. So the details of the settlement are as follows. The endowment will establish a foundation that will receive an initial $102.5 million that will go specifically to the OSU Center for Health Sciences Center for Wellness and Recovery. And beginning in January 1 of next year, the foundation will receive an annual $15 million payment over a 5-year period. And during that same 5-year time frame, it will receive ongoing contributions of addiction treatment medicine, both for rescue and recovery, and that has a market value of $20 million. So $4 million in rescue and treatment drugs over a 5-year period. Another $12.5 million from the settlement has been set aside to providing funds that will directly abate and address the opioid epidemic's effects in Oklahoma's towns, cities, and counties. Purdue will also make a $60 million payment to offset all of the state's litigation costs to this point. I would like to now call upon OSU University President Burns Hargis, followed by the President of the OSU Center for Health Sciences, Dr. Casey Shrum, to discuss the Center for Wellness and Recovery and its mission. Dr. Hargis.
Thank you, General Hunter, as well as the legal team that has fashioned this settlement that will have such a transformative effect on Oklahoma and on those who suffer from opioid addiction. The Center for Wellness and Recovery is the premier institution of research for education and treatment for addiction in the United States. It's already received an $11 million grant from the federal government for this purpose. Our world-class team will use the funds from this settlement for groundbreaking research which will result in discoveries for prevention and treatment of opioid addiction, and one day leading to an end of this nation's ongoing public health crisis. I also want to recognize Dean Shrum, also president of the Center for Health Sciences, for her leadership in this effort. I don't think we'd be here today but for her efforts, and so I would like to say once again how much we appreciate the confidence that you're showing in the Center of Wellness and Recovery. And now I ask President Shrum to come forward. Casey?
Well, thank you. The mission of the Oklahoma State Center, or Oklahoma State University Center for Wellness and Recovery, is to save lives and to rescue those who are struggling from addiction. This endowment will allow us to assist communities in Oklahoma and across the nation ravaged by the opioid epidemic with innovative approaches to address the health crisis. We will now have the resources to create a place where people can come together to engage in meaningful initiatives to prevent, treat, and eradicate this horrible disease. To that end, I also appreciate Attorney General Hunter. We are making this historic announcement today because of his relentless commitment to stopping opioid abuse and addiction, and to the legal team who has supported him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Although we celebrate this monumental victory today, we have a long road ahead. Our trial against Johnson & Johnson, Teva, and other manufacturers who we believe are responsible for creating this public health crisis is still on the horizon. And I want to briefly recognize everyone who is here working on behalf of the state of Oklahoma in this case. This team has worked countless hours, missed family occasions, and has sacrificed so much for this case. And it is easy to say that we wouldn't be here today without them. So with us we have Judge Mike Burridge, his law partner Reggie Witten, Brad Beckworth, Glenn Coffey, and your team. Please stand and we'll give you a quick round of applause. And from the Attorney General's office, you know, it's important in leadership to surround yourself with people who are smarter and more talented than you are. Case study, Abby Dilsaver, General Counsel in our office, and First Assistant Don Cash are here, and my Public Policy Chief, Lori Carter's here also. I can't thank you all enough. So I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in this process for your continued dedication to working on this case. We will create a better future for Oklahomans to live and raise a family addiction-free. As a reminder, today's agreement is only the first step in our ultimate goal of ending this nightmarish epidemic. In the coming weeks, this team and I will continue preparing for trial, where we intend to hold the other defendants, in this case, accountable for their role in creating the worst public health crisis our state and nation has ever seen. Thank you again to everyone who's come out today. I'm now happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you. Mr. Castile.
General Hunter, was there something that triggered a settlement talk with Purdue? I mean, was it, I know you guys are involved in just in the past couple of weeks of the trying to delay the trial. Were you talking settlement with Purdue at the same time? Was there something that triggered this whole thing?
Numerous vectors, Chris. I think the context that I would share with you is in order for us to have reached this settlement with Purdue, we had to take into account the fact that they were modeling bankruptcy, and that was a serious exercise with them. So as we spent time through court-ordered mediation over multiple months, there began to be an opportunity, it seemed to us, to get Purdue to look at a national settlement that was going to settle their claims with Oklahoma. And as we began to focus on the work that's done here at OSU, at the center, it became apparent to us that we could propose to Purdue that it made sense, both for Oklahoma as well as the nation, to invest in a national center for addiction treatment. OSU credibly has established this footprint, and we were able to convince Purdue that, again, this is a national settlement. It is something that can not only assist Oklahoma in dealing with the epidemic, it can assist the whole country. And so this level of funding was something that was fought for, hard, hand-to-hand combat, I would say, but it turbocharges the center here, and we believe, without question, it establishes OSU as the National Center for Addiction Treatment and Recovery.
What's the
Yes.
likelihood that the other companies will try to settle with Oklahoma, considering they try to delay the trial by 100 days?
Well, we're ready to go to trial today. The Supreme Court had its last word on whether that trial is going to occur on May 28th. They decided unanimously that the judges have made thoughtful and appropriate decisions with regard to scheduling. So we're ready to go to trial on May 28th. We do have court-ordered mediation that will occur in the meantime. As President Kennedy said, never negotiate out of fear, but never fear to negotiate. So we're ready to talk, but we're also ready to go to trial.
Do you think they'll try to settle, though?
My crystal ball doesn't tell me the answer to that question. Mr. Crable.
So when you were here a year and a half ago, did you have an inkling, or did you think that this might turn out the way it's turned out? In other words, when you were here a year and a half ago that launched this thing, were you thinking money from the settlement might be used to
Well, let's just say that my experience here has left an indelible imprint, and certainly was part of the inspiration for this settlement. And the opportunity to get to work with Dr. Shrum over the last several months and her team just underscored for me the great work, and as she has been able to begin to collect support from outside and inside the state. As we started to focus on it, it became a very easy answer to Purdue's challenge. Come up with a settlement with your state that has national import. So, again, once we focused on it, it was an easy solution. In the back.
Yeah, I know you touched on this, but how bad was it in Oklahoma for you to bring these 13 lawsuits? Were we the worst in the country?
Well, were we the worst? We were certainly in competition. The extent to which oversupply has impacted the state, the extent to which overprescribing has impacted the state, data points like 700 or 800 infants being born substance impacted every year. The data point that I shared with y'all with regard to 3,000 people just this past year being admitted to hospitals for opioid overdoses, and almost 80% of those were due to prescription drugs. It is, as I said, not to melodramatize things, but it's a clear and present danger to the state and the nation. I wouldn't say that we're ground zero, but we're pretty close. Chris?
Can I ask Dr. Shrum a question?
Sure.
Dr. Shrum, what is the current annual budget? The current annual budget for this center?
Our current annual budget,
Just trying to figure out at what scale this settlement.
we are probably, about 2.4 million?
So this is.
Oh, this is amplifying, very much so. Most of what we have done is, when we recognized, obviously you hear these statistics that have been discussed, and Oklahomans are dying, people are dying. It would be unconscionable for us not to do something, and to the extent that we began bringing in experts to provide care, researchers to begin doing research, and going out and getting grants to do research, and looking for external support as we grew that center. So this will absolutely allow us to continue and to absolutely amplify. I mean, we look forward to having a national advisory board, bringing in more experts in addition to what we have, expanding the research and the scope of what we do. And as General Hunter said, being recognized as a leader in the nation. I think we've been recognized in Oklahoma for the problem that we have, and we're now going to be recognized for being the solution.
Dr. Trump, can you talk a little bit about just how you have seen the perception of opioid addiction change really over the past several years? And you've seen it, of course, covering news change and people sort of getting it, that it really spans every single walk of life.
Right. I think that has been a real challenge for individuals suffering with addiction, for their family suffering with addiction, the stigma of who that person is. I think the medical school talking about it begins to bring home that, yes, this is a medical issue, that this isn't a moral problem with people. This is actually a disease, and a disease we have to research and we have to treat. And as we begin to do that more and more, I think people are beginning to recognize. I also think the prevalence of the issue starts to bring home really quickly with individuals, because as we stand in this room, we all know people of all walks of life who are suffering with addiction.
Can you give an example of, since 2017, how you've been able to help people who are suffering?
Right. We have opened outpatient clinics. We have been since 2000, I believe in 2013, began implementing addiction treatment curriculum into our medical school early on. So all of our students are required to spend time within an addiction treatment center. So the education at the beginning of medical school is important. We also have opened a clinic. We see patients, both inpatient and outpatient. We've expanded our research teams. We are doing efforts across the state. I think over this next year, you're going to hear about us rolling out into communities that are most impacted by the opioid epidemic, and doing screenings, educating providers in those areas, taking care of patients in those communities. We also have launched an effort that is an educational effort for providers or physicians across the state to help them gain the knowledge that they need to be able to manage addiction and to treat patients appropriately with best practices. And so through those efforts, we believe that is a multiplier of our efforts here in actually getting our knowledge out to the front line of physicians that are seeing patients all across our state.
Laureate is doing some work on brain research and addiction. Is there any collaboration between?
Yes, there is collaboration between some of our researchers and Laureate.
How is this money going to be managed exactly? Make sure that it's going to the right places.
Well, so the settlement is obviously very new, and that process is going to be worked out, but my understanding is we will be putting together a board, a national board, an advisory board that will oversee all of the treatment, advocacy, research, and the dollars around that. Would you like to comment on that?
So the model is the MD Anderson Center down in Houston. I think the opportunity we have to be the MD Anderson Center for Addiction and Treatment is real and manifestly apparent to me. They have a 15-member board for their foundation. I mean, the thought is these settlement funds would go into that foundation and they'd be managed by a 15-member board of state leaders and scientists and people in this footprint around the country. So it'll be a national board, and again, the focus will be on every one of these dollars going into the center.
Can you just comment on how comparable this could be to the tobacco settlement? A lot of people are talking about kind of what scale this could be.
So it's not apples and apples. The tobacco settlement contemplated that the manufacturers would continue to sell cigarettes and cigars and smokable products, and there's been a significant revenue stream since the settlement based on those sales. So what we're hopeful for is a dramatic abatement of the sale of pharmaceutical opioids. Want to be careful to advise and recognize that opioids are appropriate for acute pain subsequent to surgery, and they're very important for palliative care. And there are people for whom, although it's chronic pain, there aren't alternatives. So there are subsets of patients who require opioids, but the goal is to dramatically curtail the supply and prescribing of analgesic opioids. And part of the settlement with Purdue, I should hasten to add, is we have an injunction so that they will no longer promote the sale or marketing of analgesic opioids within the state. So that was a very important part of this settlement, and we intend to, that is a non-negotiable part of any subsequent settlements that we might enter into with other defendants. Any other questions?
So normally
Randy.
somebody gives $190 million to a university, they get a building or something named after them. Is any part of this going to have the Purdue name on it or family name on it?
No. Thank you for your question.
Obviously, this is a big settlement today, but for some families who may have lost loved ones from the opioid crisis, this may never be enough for justice. What do you tell those families?
Well, this is just one piece of the puzzle, if you will, that the state is working on. This past year, groundbreaking legislation was passed to curtail the prescribing of prescription opioids. It also gave law enforcement more ability to interdict oversupply. We're now going to move away from paper prescriptions to e-prescribing. The diversion that was occurring with regard to people falsifying prescriptions and obtaining opioids was significant. So this is just a piece of a overall comprehensive approach that the state is taking to the epidemic. So there's still policy to do on this front, and we're engaged with the legislature and the governor over the next several months to provide the state more tools. The results of this litigation are important to provide funding to begin to deal with the treatment and rehabilitation responsibilities of the state to get people over their addiction, to get them back on the straight and narrow. So they shouldn't focus, folks should not focus or obsess on this being the solution. It's a part. We still have 3 defendants in the litigation. We're ready to go to trial today, May 28th trial date, and we intend to hold those companies responsible for the mess that they've made here in the state. So this is just one piece of what, again, I would describe as a comprehensive approach that the state is taking to deal with the epidemic and its fallout.
Obviously, fighting big business like this is not a cheap endeavor. I mean, you're fighting companies like Johnson & Johnson and Pharma. You mentioned that Purdue will make a $60 million payment to help offset the litigation costs. What is the state looking at this point in terms of litigation costs?
Well, so that's about 22% of the settlement. If you were to look at this as an enterprise or an investment, 22% is a reasonable overhead cost. But I just have to say, when you're going up against the best lawyers in the country, when you're going up against Big Pharma, you have to get the best people, the best lawyers, the most talented, the most relentless attorneys that you can find. And so this team that the state has been able to assemble is world class. And as I've said many times, Reggie Whitten and Mike Burridge, who are lead counsel for the state, this isn't just another case for them. They've both lost loved ones, and they're in this to make their loved ones' lives mean something outside of the loss that they've suffered through. So I didn't just get great lawyers here. I got lawyers who are going to pour their heart and soul into this case, and they've done just that. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Go ahead. One more question.
Is the settlement safe if Purdue decides to file for bankruptcy to protect itself from other liabilities?
So we've gone to extensive efforts to ensure that this commitment to the state is bankruptcy proof. We've gotten a commitment that they are not filing bankruptcy in the near term. We also have irrevocable letters of credit in place at a bank here in the state that collateralize the funding. So we've gone to great lengths to ensure that this is real money, that it's not at risk in the event Purdue declares bankruptcy. So thank you for your question. So if there's nothing else, I appreciate everyone coming and appreciate your support. May 28th, we're on to our trial, and wish us luck. Thank you again very much.